Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca.
Welcome, friends. I am Cindy Thompson, and this is a Resilience Project. This is a space where stories are shared and possibilities are discovered. I invite you to partner with me in cultivating resilience among humans, one conversation at a time. Today, I am pleased to have with us Dr. Robert Lees. Dr. Lees is a psychologist registered in British Columbia and holds an earned doctorate from the University of British Columbia in Counseling Psychology, 1986. Prior to training and becoming a psychologist, Dr. Lees worked in Christian ministry for 10 years until he figured out pastoring is a profession for extroverts, whereas psychology is a refuge for introverts. Dr. Lees has held supervisory positions with child and youth mental health in the province of British Columbia for 30 years, while simultaneously maintaining a private practice of psychology with adults. Dr. Lees thinks if he wasn't an introvert, he would like to change the world someday. But in the meantime, he is content to work with one person at a time. All right, Rob, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate that you would take some time out of your busy schedule to have a conversation about something that's really important.
Glad to be here.
Great. Well, and I just want to acknowledge that, I don't know if you realize this, but we've known each other for about 27 years. It's been a long time. It's like a lifetime, right?
Yes.
So Dr. Rob Lees used to work with me at Child and Youth Mental Health at the time, Ministry for Children and Families in Chilliwack, BC. And Rob continues to do a number of wonderful things in that community. So one of the things that we highlighted and pulled out that we'd want to talk about today was your work that you're doing in private practice with veterans. Can you tell me what about that stood out for you as really valuable?
So I've learned a lot about the military through working with veterans and through different periods of Canadian history. So your listeners may not know all the different things that the Canadian military has been involved with, but we've had veterans who served in Cyprus as peacekeepers in the Golan Heights, who went to the first Gulf War, even though a lot of people weren't even aware Canada was part of that. They were there in the First World War, sort of cleaning up after it. And then they were in Bosnia at two different times, both as peacekeepers and then under NATO. After they started getting shot at, they figured out they better change the rules of engagement and allow them to protect themselves. Rwanda, which was a very horrific thing. And we all know the story about General Dallaire and some of those people and just horrific experiences being part of seeing genocide. And that's what the Canadians in Bosnia were exposed to as well as genocide. And then, of course, the most recent and real war that Canada has been involved with was the Afghan War. So I know veterans who are my age. I'm 71 right now. And so there's people who are my age who served in Cyprus and those sorts of peacekeeping missions. And then the guys who are 30 years old and they went to war when they were 20 years old and were, shooting rounds and being blown up and these sorts of experiences. So it's helped me understand the life of soldiers. And something I think I'd mentioned to you before, and this I didn't come to this on my own, but it was something I was reading, but it instantly clicked for me that a lot of the people who returned from places like Afghanistan that were so different to their normal experience of life, so they come back to Canada afterwards and they feel detached, they feel alone, they've got no purpose. Many of them die by suicide or through alcohol or drugs. And something I was reading was saying one of the major problems was that when people are in the theater of war, they have a sense of camaraderie, they have a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, and a sense of meaning. And then people come home and they feel like, okay, what's my meaning now? How do I get that sense of real strong connection that I had before. But of course, it's hard to articulate that because they should be relieved. They should have the world by the tail, but there's something missing. And then how to find that.
That must be so confusing to be relieved of that stressful situation and then be home safe, theoretically, and have that experience. I can't imagine.
And then what we tend to throw at them as psychologists and counselors is we tend to throw at them cognitive behavioral therapy for trauma, for example, or EMDR. And we're treating it as something that's just localized inside of them as somehow they're broken or flawed, and not looking at it in the big societal context of how do you find meaning and purpose and belonging that you had. And one soldier that I talked to said, that was probably the best time of my life.
Wow.
And even though what I've heard from the most honest people who have been in Afghanistan is that it's scary the whole time because they don't know who are the combatants, who's after them, if it's children that are going to try to bomb them or blow them up. And so that's also living on the edge of a lot of adrenaline as well, right? And how do you get that again in a safe North American society?
So if people are living in that constant state where it's like an adrenaline rush or always living in fear, can their brains kind of get rewired in a way as if they're in longer tours there?
That's what the trauma experts say, that happens. And I'm thinking about the book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Bruce Perry, who's kind of a well-known psychiatrist in the trauma area. And he talks about the kids in the David Koresh situation down in Texas.
Yes.
And how after those children were taken out of that situation, he went into a place where they were sleeping. And they didn't want him to go in. And he said to the person guarding them, you go over and take that child's pulse there. The child is resting. And if that child's pulse is under 100, then I'll go away. And they went over and they took the child's resting pulse, something like 120.
Wow.
Yeah.
At rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So carry on. I just thought that was an interesting piece as to how do you then get that feeling when you come back? Like when you are no longer in that situation, how do you feel good or how do you feel there's a purpose?
And it is a real existential crisis for people, especially those that get out of the military. Those that stay in often feel disappointed because they're not doing anything that seems to have a great deal of meaning, going through the ropes, just general day-to-day type of activity. But yeah, finding meaning is really a key thing. And most psychotherapists, as you know, going back to, say, Viktor Frankl and the whole issue of how did people survive the whole Holocaust experience had to do with meaning and a sense of purpose. And so, Cindy, something else I might have mentioned to you that I'm really keen on is the work of a psychologist named Marshall Rosenberg.
Okay, yes.
Right. And Rosenberg says that the greatest joy that human beings can get is bringing joy to someone else.
Beautiful.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the evidence is pretty clear about that too. And the hard evidence for psychology is telling us more and more that there's truth behind those types of sayings. UBC did some study with high school students. I think it was in the Coquitlam, British Columbia area,
Mm-hmm.
where they asked one group of students to volunteer 1 hour a week. And they took swabs of saliva. And they found that the group that was volunteering 1 hour a week, that their stress hormones were less than the students that weren't being asked to do that.
So it really counterbalances, at least does some harm reduction to the stress that people might be going through if they have something they're engaged in.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're, I'm sure, aware of the adverse childhood events literature, and many people who were raised in situations of trauma and that were unhealthy. The question I have is, what can you do to roll back and reverse some of the implications of that cellular damage from trauma.
Yes.
And I think there are things people can do. And they're being, mindful, prayer, meditation, any of those kinds of things that get our whole system settled down and get us more grounded.
Yes.
The positive psychology, now that's something else that's really sort of blossomed in the last 20 years. The work of, say, Martin Seligman. And Seligman talks about three kinds of happiness. So one is just general pleasure. And that lasts as long as it lasts, as long as you're having that pleasure, whatever it is, going skiing or something that's highly stimulating can be pleasurable. And then the second kind is called flow. That's when you're really engaged. Like I feel really engaged right now, and it's kind of exciting, right, to be in this conversation with you.
Me too.
And then the third thing is meaning and purpose. And so to find some big purpose for your life, and, it doesn't have to be something like founding the United Nations, but to find something where you bring joy to others. That same guy, Rosenberg, he did some remarkable things in his lifetime. He's deceased now, unfortunately.
Okay.
But he did some great mediation work around the world, like between Jews and Palestinians. And there's a school there in Palestine that was founded, I believe, after him and his model. And so Rosenberg is often called naive because of his approach and the things that he does. And he says that he's not naive. He sees the horrid things in the world, but like Mr. Rogers, he chooses to focus his mind on the helpers.
Beautiful. I just bought a Mr. Rogers book because I love those quotes. Yeah. I mean, so it makes me think about why I'm doing this resilience project, right? Like I think about if there's something we can do to help make a difference in our community, then why not just try to change some little aspect? If it can help shift a belief or an understanding, then that's why we're here, right? So I really appreciate those insights.
Yeah, I think like I share that sense of desire to do some resilience, make the world a better place, that sort of thing. And I think having that is going to be beneficial for us as well as for others.
Yes.
Something else, Cindy, I mentioned to you was that from working with soldiers, I see one of the things they're really good at is showing up. Like when you work with veteran clients, seldom are they late.
Oh, yes.
Right?
It's beautiful.
It is.
You can count on that.
You can count on them. Exactly. Highly reliable. And so as I've looked at them and I've thought big picture in terms of our society and what's good for our society, I've mentioned to you that I've been sort of writing my own little manifesto for the world, like based on what I see in psychology.
Yes.
And I'm calling it Everybody Counts, Everybody Contributes.
Love it.
And I got started on it because I have a cousin who goes down to Arizona, and I could not figure out why so many Arizonians are negative about immigrants.
Oh.
Because essentially the immigrants do all the work down there. If it's gardening, growing, anything like that, it's going to be immigrants that are doing it. And so why do white Republicans feel so negative about immigrants? And my cousin's view is because they think they haven't contributed, they haven't paid their dues.
Interesting.
So that got me thinking about how do people pay their dues? And I know we just finished Remembrance Day here in Canada, and people will say to veterans, thank you for your service.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So a veteran has paid their dues to their country. How do the rest of us pay our dues? Well, the only thing we do is we pay taxes, right? But if that's our dues, right? But if immigrants come here, it's like they're benefiting from everything that has been gone before. So my cousin's insight was they haven't ever seemed to have contributed. Now we know that immigrants contribute a great deal to our country. But in terms of people who have negative views, my cousin's insight, I think, has some value. And this whole thing about how do we prove that we've contributed?
And how much is enough?
Yes, and yeah, exactly. So I got thinking about these military people and countries that have compulsory military service.
Oh, okay.
Like Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I had a student recently who was in the Israeli military because it's required. Everybody does it. Switzerland, I understand, has something like that too. And because I work with a lot of youth, and a lot of youth don't seem to have direction, the whole idea of having some type of military service, usually people who are in the military, they know how to show up, they know how to do what's necessary to look after themselves. So the idea would be that everybody contributes some way to the country for a year or two. And so anybody coming into the country and anyone raised in the country, they all contribute the same. They pay their dues.
Yes. Okay.
And then the second part is that everybody counts. So in psychology, we think about attachment theory. We think about belonging and connection and having a sense of we-ness and that we're together. And some of the horrible forces in our society are dividing people. You know, even our conversation just now about immigrants somehow being different than us.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I'm a white 71-year-old man. I may look like I belong in North America, but actually my dad was a first-generation immigrant.
Ah, yes.
Right? So there's tons of people like that in Canada. But if you have a white skin, you just make this assumption, I belong here.
Mm.
Right? Whereas people who have brown skin, they may have been here for centuries. And yet people will say to them, why don't you go back to where you came from?
Yeah, good point.
So how do we establish a society where everybody feels like they belong here, they've paid their dues here, and belonging is really so important to having a healthy community.
And it seems to me that is a key antidote to build resilience, is to be part of a community. As you spoke about, as veterans, they felt part of something. They felt part of something meaningful. They had some way of contributing, a purpose, right? Which is probably what they signed up for. They wanted to do something meaningful. So it sounds like a key component to when they come back, how can they find community just around their neighborhood? How can they find community or a sense of belonging, even if they're not helping to protect our country somewhere else?
Right. See, like I've thought about the business about taxation, for example, and how negative most folks are about paying taxes.
Yes.
But if you start thinking of it as, this is how I pay my dues. This is how I contribute to the whole and to everybody. And so how to get that sense of generosity that we have often when we see people who are vulnerable has to be an everyday thing for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Something we don't really think about necessarily every day or recognize.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, in another part of my work, I'm involved with a program at a local high school where we're training young people to be like mental health educators. And so the notion is we train the high school students to help the little kids in elementary school. And if your readers know or listeners know how schools work, usually there's a band of elementary schools that feed up to middle schools, and then those feed up to a high school. So they're all linked. And if a child stays in their same track, same community, they'll go from an elementary school here to a middle school that feeds to the high school. So eventually, the high school students that we are training will talk to kids in a school that will one day be in the place of those high school students. So there's that sense of community already.
Already. And who doesn't look up to an older teen in a high school?
So one of the principals says that the high school students coming to our school are like rock stars.
Oh, wow.
And so for the high school students, you can imagine what that does for them to be people that are seen as competent, have something to offer, and are kind of idolized by these little kids too. There's a concept in community psychology called place attachment.
Okay.
And so place attachment has to do with whether or not you feel a sense of ownership of your place. And so you've seen buildings where people deface things, for example. People don't usually deface things if they feel like they've got a stake in them and that they belong to them.
True.
Right? So how do we build communities where little kids feel like they can see their future and it's good, and that people ahead of them care about them and see meaning and value in them enough to come and to teach them something?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, no, that's great, because I was thinking about, I've often referred to this. I can't remember. I wish I knew exactly what study it was from, because it was at a conference I attended. But it really stood out for me that what makes a difference for somebody who maybe has experienced adversity as a child, and what helps them to become stronger versus someone else who's experienced a similar adversity. And what stood out was that usually what makes a difference is if somebody charismatic has just seen you, and actually it could be a teacher, it could have been another neighborhood adult that really saw you and took an interest in you, that can be a real protective measure for building resiliency, even though similar childhood experiences might have been comparable.
Beautiful. Exactly. Yeah. And I like the thing about charismatic.
Yeah.
That's something I hadn't thought of before or heard before. I heard the part about having one person who takes a personal interest, but also that sense of charisma. And I think our high school students have that.
Awesome.
But there's all kinds of stories about how the janitor in a school was the person that made a difference.
Right.
In a child's life because they took an interest in them.
And so how are these high school students, how is it decided that they would be involved? Do they volunteer? Are they kind of trained up to be involved and given the skill set on how to help them?
Yeah, so there's a fairly robust psychology program at this school for grade 10, 11, and 12.
Okay.
And students volunteer to be part of the program, which is called Human Service Career Enrichment Program. People often hear the word service and they think human services,
Yes.
social work, but we're saying no, it's the word service, because we're trying to develop young people who have a service ethos, who see their lives as being service, as, being people who are change makers in the world because they're committed to serving in some way. And so we also recruit university students who come and co-train on 8 Saturdays per year with these high school students. And the training is on topics like peer counseling, mindfulness, mental health literacy, motivational interviewing, different topics around counseling. This weekend, they're getting some training in qualitative research methods.
Oh, my.
On Saturday. And so they have those trainings in grade 10 and 11, 12, but when they're in grade 11 and 12, then they're in a new program called Building Social Emotional Resiliency for Children. And so that's the mental health training with the little kids too.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic, because I do think there seems to be a trend, right, where teachers will say, I don't have time to teach right now because there's so many social emotional needs among the children that they're sort of putting out fires. So what a lovely piece of resilience that this would also bring for the high school students to have that skill set and to help one another, not just the young people that they're helping.
Exactly. Like it's kind of boosts them and helps them to see that they can be people who make a difference.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people see schooling as you go in there and you take the top off. You know, you've heard that analogy.
Yes.
Take the top off and just pour the knowledge in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think educators are moving more towards applied knowledge. And so this is taking psychological knowledge and applying it right away, and then learning from doing as well. The trades have known this for a long time, but fields like ours have not really engaged in it all that much. And we've, at sometimes there are some adults who don't think young people are capable of doing this. But our experience has been they're definitely able to do it, and children respond to it in a way they don't when adults teach them.
Well, it makes a great deal of sense. And also, I'm thinking about the resilience you're building, not only in the high school students, because they're feeling a purpose, they're feeling needed, they're feeling like there is something that they can do that's of a greater good. You're building resilience among the younger people, but you're also helping university students get this experience. You're covering just about all areas.
It is good that way. And, the part about being needed, I think that's so important in a society. And just back to that idea of universal public service or universal military service, that basically says to a young person, hey, we need you.
Yeah.
You've got a place here, right? And so it grabs them at a time when they're really vulnerable and maybe not knowing exactly where they're going to be going, and gives them some direction, some training. That's going back to veterans. That's one of the things I've learned from veterans is these people know their country. They know people all over the country. They've traveled all over the country.
Yeah. Well, and maybe just as we get ready to wrap up here soon, I wondered, is there anything more we could be doing as a society to reach out to veterans? Or is there any thoughts on how we could be making a difference?
Just that simple saying of thank you for your service.
Okay.
I know for veterans, that means a lot to them. And they don't hear it all the time, but you'll see a lot of veteran plates around these days. That's something new since, I think, the Afghan war.
Ah, yes.
That's occurred because there's just so many more that have been in a theater of war. So just something that simple as acknowledging that they've served their country. And, some of them feel badly about getting a pension, or if they were injured and they're getting a pension. And, I say to them, like you and I, when we go to work, nobody's going to say to you, okay, Cindy, you're going to Afghanistan tomorrow.
Right.
And you're going to be in harm's way, right?
Yeah.
But these people surrender themselves to that possibility, which takes courage and commitment. So I think if we see that as that's been commitment to our society as a whole, is validating them for that as something. I think everybody has to find their own purpose and meaning, something that fits with them and their personality. And that can be a struggle. I don't think we can tell them what to do.
Absolutely. Well, and I think about as community too. So one aspect could be to thank them for their service. Absolutely. And I really love that as a reminder, because we often think of it maybe around Remembrance Day, and it's timely that we are talking, literally a couple days after, right? But I wonder about, like, often as I'm out going for a run or see people in the street, someone who's elderly, I think of someone elderly, but it could be anybody. I try to say hi, right? And just to acknowledge people, because you don't know what they're going through that day. But I wonder, as a community, are there ways that we could embrace them to be involved more if that's what they wanted, or to ask them, or maybe sit down with them and hear their story? Would that be of benefit?
If they want to do that.
Yes.
Not all wish to speak about their story. And some of them I've heard, they feel like people are being sometimes voyeuristic.
Oh.
Like a number of them have said to me, did you kill anybody? And they found that very noxious, type of thing, to be quite intrusive,
Mm-hmm.
But I think just validation for going. I'm not sure if people know that there's a number of Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and I know that your husband has had some connection with them, that there were some RCM police who went to Afghanistan. And it was just, from the stories I've heard, I feel like I've got some sense of it.
Yes.
It's just even flying into it was a scary experience. And then the whole time people were there, not knowing who to trust.
Yeah.
So going back to what you're saying about, well, what can we do for veterans? I think, supporting our government that supports them. As you said, listening if they want to talk. Remembrance Day is really important, but also joining causes. But there's a cause called the Wounded Warriors, for example.
Okay.
Right. And they have rides to raise awareness about the impacts.
Okay, good to know. I don't think I'd heard about that, so that's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And where you live, you're not too far from two of Canada's big military bases. One's naval and one is Air Force.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So that there are people around. But I just think what you said earlier about noticing people, that's the kind of the small change of morality, they call it. And it matters.
Really? Wow. I so appreciate your insights, your experience. And from working with you many years ago, I just know that I often refer to you as, like the oyster creating the pearl, always. And, you are not afraid to dig in deep and talk to the people that you need to talk to make these programs happen. So I really appreciate all the things you've done in Chilliwack and surrounding areas for many, many years, because I know to this day there are programs even here on the island within mental health that would have been instrumental in some of the things you would have started back in the day when we worked together. So I really appreciate your creativity, your willingness to put that out there, and not afraid to face a challenge. So because of that, many, many people have benefited and still are with the programs you're creating. So thank you, Rob.
Well, thanks for saying that, Cindy. And also thank you for the opportunity to expound a little bit on some of my thoughts on matters that are important to me. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. In talking with Dr. Lees today, you can see there are so many areas of humanity in which we could identify and support one another to build community, whether it is growing a connection and empathy among youth or recognizing some of the challenges veterans have experienced in their service. By acknowledging each individual, we have an opportunity every day to make a difference in one person's life. I will leave you with this quote today by Anne Ashford. If it all that I would want to do would be to sit and talk to you, would you listen? Thank you for listening to this episode of A Resilience Project. We would not be doing this podcast without you. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story or is helping to build resilience in their community, please email me at cindy@aresilienceproject.com. In fact, email me either way. I would love to hear from you. Also, check out my website, aresilienceproject.com, to meet the amazing people who have joined me on these podcasts. Last but not least, a big thank you to Doris Media House for their editing support. As you go about your week, I invite you to think about one way you can continue to grow your resilience muscle. What is one thing you can start doing today? See you next week.
Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca